you've been involved with them pretty close for almost 30 years, I guess 30 years now. You've been writing this magazine for so long and you've written about so many topics with the band and like minute details about the guys and interviewed all these people that have worked with them or spent the weekend with them or met them once in 1987. Like, what draws you back to talk about them and write about them so passionately when you're a walking textbook at this point and you know so much about the guys and you know them personally? What keeps you coming back to be like, is it possible to get bored of the Beach Boys? Or do you always find yourself being like, ooh, that's cool. Let me talk about that. Like, where do you stand with that?
That kind of now at this point in my life, that kind of comes and goes. What I was touching on with Carl was that when he passed, I was of the presence of mind the same day that I was going to continue working on ESQ even harder than ever to fulfill what I thought, because he gave me that moment, that I was going to, whether anybody liked it or not, because it's just something I decided, not me. I
Right.
just decided, okay, I'm gonna keep this going, and and I didn't know how many years or anything like that. I just thought, okay, I'm gonna keep this going, and I'm gonna give my heart to this.
Yeah.
They they deserve that, and that was the extent of the thought. It wasn't, and again at that time when he passed, we didn't see the results of his passing immediately. We saw
Right.
it within the calendar year, but not immediately.
Right.
And and so I just I had talked to the guys enough times by that point, by 98, met them enough, interacted with them enough that I just find them all likable in their own way.
Yeah.
And so specifically now, I do go through things where I'm like, what else do I have to write about? What else is it that I want to tell? What else is there? They're not going to be, and I'm not being morbid, but they're not going to be here forever.
I mean,
They're very close. My parents are just like a year or two older than they are.
yeah.
So, I think about those things just because it's just, it's a natural part of life, and we've seen a lot of uh, musician people already pass away this year. Are people in the Beach Boys umbrella that have passed away this year.
Yeah.
And so it's, I'll give you an example. You held up the recent issue. In the recent magazine, that article, the revisiting Brian Wilson's relationship music, that took me 5 years to write. Because as I
Unbelievable.
write in the magazine, it started with the great release that Mark Lynette, Alan Boyd, and Howie Edelson put together, the Sunshine Tomorrow collection,
Yeah.
where we heard extra bits from the Wild Honey and Smiley Smile albums. Then the digital releases, and I hope people know about this. If they get ESQ, they'll know because I put the QR codes in there for them to go right to it.
Yep.
The digital releases: Friends, Wake the World, the Friends Sessions, and then 2020, the I Can Hear Music digitals, and those are both digital only. But I wanted to. I knew 4 to 5 years ago that after those three, the Sunshine Tomorrow, and then those two digital releases came out, that there was something here that I was like hearing just Brian's music. I mean, Dennis did a lot of stuff, but Brian's music, I thought there's something here just by itself. What was Brian doing?
Yeah.
And why was he doing it? And then why did he stop? Right? Because that's like the looming question in Beach Boys lore. Why did Brian Wilson stop?
Yeah.
Because why would you stop if you do Pet Sounds and then Good Vibrations and then I mean, Smiley Smell, Wild Honey are good enough albums.
Hmm.
And then Brian loved Friends, whether anybody watching this loves Friends or not. Brian loved Friends. And so in his mind, that was his second Pet Sounds,
Right.
right? That was him being in the studio again, working with studio musicians,
And the whole thing.
really putting his heart and soul into it. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Friends was his second Pet Sounds.
Absolutely.
And so why did it stop after that? Was it because, and there's all these variables of reasons. And so I wanted to just indulge myself with the music only, because I already know, like you say, I've been covering it for so long. I know all the various reasons,
Right. Right.
but I wanted to kind of get to the heart of his music. And so it took me 5 years. I just made a playlist. I put the songs together. Then I kept rearranging them as I would listen. just from doing other work on the computer, just working on something, I would just play it.
Yeah.
And I keep rearranging them a certain way. And then just like this last December, that it came back to me and I said, okay, I'm ready to write about it now.
Yeah.
I've listened to it enough. I'm familiar enough with this material that the second if I just think about the song, even if it's an incomplete song, I know exactly what I'm thinking of. It's not like I have to go back and listen to it again.
Right.
So that was one thing I had to familiarize myself. And when it's not an actual new Beach Boys release or whatever, you don't listen to it days on end and on and on and on. So that was the other tricky part, was I'm not listening to it all the time.
Yeah.
So, but then I got to the point where it just revealed itself to me. And I don't think the word is exciting, but it's definitely I really cherish the moments as a writer when I know I want to write about something and then it presents itself.
I love that. I mean, that's kind of the thing I took away from. We'll talk about this here anyway. The article you wrote about Brian in this period, post Smile, like, Wild Honey, Friends. My kind of takeaway after reading it, because it's such a well written and thoughtful piece, is that like Brian at that point in his life was very spontaneous and impulsive. So like, do you think if he hadn't met Van Dyke Parks, and if he maybe continued working with Tony Asher or something, do you think he would have gone as adventurous as something as Smile, or stayed with something kind of in the Pet Sounds vein, and the trajectory of their career would have been completely different if that had been the case? But like, do you think if Smile never happened, we would have ever gotten a Friends?
It's so hard to say and that's really what made writing that article difficult, and why it took me a while to kind of find it.
Yeah.
Was because, and that's, I think, kind of how I lead off the article, is it's so, I wanted to know the music well enough that my subjective perspective of why, how, and when was not such a pivotal part of the article, so much as to just look at this material, what was happening in his life.
Right.
Then he stopped. Why? So that, Van Dyke is an incredible, my favorite Beach Boy song is Cabin Essence.
Such a great song.
Yeah. So that's Brian and Van Dyke.
Yeah.
So I don't for a second not want to have the Van Dyke and Brian discussion.
Right.
But if you look at what Pet Sounds was, and if you look at what Good Vibrations was, and I write in the article that to me, Good Vibrations was a love letter to his mother.
Yeah, I thought that was
because his mother was the one who inspired the entire title.
Right.
So I love the colorful clothes she wears and the way the sunlight plays upon her hair. He's like, look at my mom. Look at my mom. Mike is the one who came in with the I'm picking up good vibration. So even though that works with Guy Girl, that could also be Audrey is too cool for school, right? I'm picking up good vibrations from her because that's what she's all about. So I think as much as Good Vibrations is whatever you want to subjectively make it, from Brian's personal perspective, it is an echo statement to what his mother represented.
That's cool.
And so again, looking at Brian as a person, right? Because that's what Pet Sounds is, right? You listen to Pet Sounds. What is Pet Sounds? You take away Tony Asher's lyrics, which would be David Leave's argument. You take away, right? So it's Brian's music. Well, yep. Yes, you could listen to that album and you could feel who Brian Wilson was, 100%.
Absolutely.
So based on that, going forward, Smile is nothing like, and again, Brian on his own, not with Van Dyke, but Brian on his own during Smile wanted to get into humor.
Yeah.
Right? That has nothing to do with what he was doing with Pet Sounds or Good Vibrations. It wasn't that same arc of in the back of my mind or Lonely Sea or in my room or all this stuff that was slowly, please let me wonder, that was slowly trickling in and showing us there's this really inverted guy who's creating this majestic beauty for all the world to share.
Yeah.
That here's, these little samples all the way through his career, then Pet Sounds, then, and even on Summer Days, it's the instrumental, and your dream comes true.
Yeah. For Summer Means New Love.
That's beautiful. That's that one little moment he gave us off that album where he goes, here I am. Here I am.
Yeah.
If you're wondering, if
Yeah.
anybody's listening, and you're probably not because you just want to hear Sloop John B or California Girls or whatever. But
Yeah.
here I
Something
am.
like that. Yeah.
I'm here. I'm here. And that's what he kept doing on every Beach Boys album. And then he had Pet Sounds, and then he had Good Vibrations, and then he had Wonderful too. Okay, and Wonderful's the one. If you listen to all the Smile stuff, Wonderful's that one song, like all the early Beach Boys albums, that leaked through. That was Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Was that earnest, inverted, heartfelt guy that had his heart on his sleeve, that was telling the world that he was suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Music was a lot like him.
Yeah, and again, you don't need the lyrics.
Right.
Take the lyrics off, you can feel it.
Yep.
And you can listen to Fire and feel it.
Yeah.
You feel a person breaking down. That's what Fire is. It's a person breaking down. But again, Smile had nothing to do with Brian, the artist. Brian, the being that needed to show and express himself. Right? So he got off into a different bag. And I think I read it in the like with Van Dyke. Van Dyke was a hipster.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
He was a hipster. And a lot of the people that hung around Van Dyke, the David Crosbys, the Terry Melchers, the whoever, all were hipsters.
Yeah.
Brian was not a hipster. Brian was never a hipster. He hung out with hipsters.
Yep.
But just a square is hip to be square. So he was as square as you could be, and all the hipsters wanted to be around him.
Right.
So it was like he was not a Hollywood dude. He just lived in Hollywood. That's all. He was just like an accidental tourist.
Yeah. Right.
So there he is, and he's writing this music. He's getting off into the strange stuff, and I didn't write the single word drug in my entire article because it's been written elsewhere. But for the sake of this conversation, I will say that's why Smile is all over the place.
Yeah.
He was into different types of drugs, and it would reflect that in what he was working on. And then when you think about it, he shelved Smile, and why? Well, wait, let's just go back to the guy he is. He doesn't know what to do with it. And why is it? Is it because Van Dyke is gone? Partially.
Yeah.
Is it because he's under too much pressure? Partially.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the drug use? Partially. But the bottom line is, if you know who Brian Wilson is as a recording artist, and you are in love with Pet Sounds, and you get who he is as a recording artist, that's why.
Yeah.
That's why. He didn't know. He was like, I just want to write music that I feel. I don't understand. I worked on Heroes and Villains, and I went to the radio station. The guy wouldn't play it right away. He had to call his boss. What the heck?
Right.
Obviously this other thing that I'm doing isn't working.
Yeah.
Why did I do this? It's not who I am anyway. Right? I mean, I'm guessing this is the type of things that were going through his head. Why did I do this? This isn't who I am. This isn't like Pet Sounds. This is not what I'm about.
Yeah.
I don't know how to finish this. Van Dyke is gone. What do I do? And so he kept doing his best to kind of try to figure things out. But he ultimately, if you listen to, like I said, Wonderful, and then you listen to, then he goes, and again, Smiley Smile is its own beast. Very interesting album.
I love that album.
So do I. Then he gets to Wild Honey, and over half of the material, 75 to 80% of that album is Brian writing relationship music again.
Yeah, right.
I'd love just once to see you.
Yeah.
All this, Darling. It's all back to love. It's all back to Brian's heart again. But it's done differently. Now they have a studio in Brian's house. The guys just come over and they jam, and it's almost like a live album. It's unplugged.
3 years.
It's just, show up, jam, and we're done. And it was that contractual agreement thing again. We gotta hurry. Let's just do it. And he ends up getting a handful of these songs that are again back to relationship, who he is, what he needs.
Right.
How he needs to express himself. And then you follow that with Friends, which is the exact same thing. And I have that great quote from Marilyn, his first wife, in there about that she considers Wild Honey and Friends one big extension. Yeah. That it's just one extension. See, so cool. We the fans, when we go on and buy an album, that's all we think about. Okay, this is the album, these are the songs. We don't think about how many months it's been between this recording session and this recording session,
They're all
and
disappearing.
what
Yeah.
was going on in this person's life that we can examine, and why is this the way that it is. But because these albums are so old, we do get to do that a little bit.
Right.
And
Right.
so that's what's fortunate about that. But you get into Friends, he's relationship music again. Meant for You, Friends, the song Friends.
Yeah.
And then in the Richard Mayer interview, which is the first feature, which I wanted to go first in the brand new issue, he talks about all the photos that they did at the LAX airport.
That was great.
Richard thought Brian was doing that because he thought he wanted that as the Friends cover.
That's so cool.
I mean, who would have, and why would he want that? Because the Beach Boys aren't. It makes no sense. But on the other hand, it does make sense because these were Brian's friends.
That was just, yeah.
Right. Right. So was he thinking about a solo album? We don't know. We don't know. But what we do know, just on the fact that that song was released and knowing that song and knowing that album, is Brian was once again writing about relationships, and that's what he wanted to write about, and that's what he represented as a recording artist. That's what it was important to him, to express himself through music. And any Beach Boy fan can tell you that if they just own the first album.
Oh yeah.
By the group. Brian was a recording artist who wanted to express himself through his music.
Yeah.
And what is one of his great solo career recordings? Love and Mercy. Again, the guy expressing himself. So I looked at that entire article through that lens of what was Brian trying to do, and how was he trying to, what was he trying to communicate to the music world. And then, the album did pretty well over in the UK. It just did not do well here in the United States when it was released.
It's their lowest charting at the time.
It's funny to kind of, success is success to me. Like, if it's successful one place, why not feel good about it? But Brian, and everybody, a lot of Beach Boy fans will say, well, the Beach Boys and Capitol Records had all the pressure on him that he had to provide the next hit. True, but Brian also expected that of himself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
He knew that he had the ability to write another hit. So when he writes a song and takes it to the station with Heroes and Villains, and the guy won't play it right away, whoever was with Brian should have just slapped the guy. I think it was Arnie Geller. You just slap the guy upside the head and say, play it already. Do you really, this is Brian Wilson. You play it, dude.
Especially because Good Vibrations.
It's insane. It's insane to me. It's Heroes and Villains. The guy is coming to your studio to give you the exclusive, and you got to call the boss.
Like the follow-up single to the biggest hit they ever
Good
had.
Vibrations. I know. What is wrong with you?
Unbelievable.
So anyway, it's unbelievable. So then the same thing happens. They release Friends, and all the DJs, local DJs in his area out in Los Angeles and across the United States, are just like, what is this?
Yeah.
What is this? And they're questioning his intention, not just his expression, but his intention. He's writing a song about togetherness and love and relationships,
peaceful,
and it being in harmony and being loving, and DJs are saying, this isn't any good. What is this?
Jimi Hendrix.
Well, this isn't the next step above Good Vibrations and Heroes and Villains. What's happening here? What's happening? And all he's doing is going back to Pet Sounds.
What he's always done.
Right? He's just going back to what he knows. He's just going back to love of music and expressing himself through it. And so that really got to him. And I'm kind of giving a lot of the article away, but the other thing that really struck me is as again, Richard Mayer talks about this, and I have the great quote from Arnie Geller that I included in there about the dad, Murray. And as Brian becomes a father, with Carney being born in April of '68, as he's becoming a father, adjusting to what fatherhood means, trying to look into, the world of his responsibilities and how he can be a good dad. His own father won't get off the phone with him. His own father is berating him. His own father is manipulating him and says, your songs don't mean crap.
Right.
And look at what they just said about your song, Friends. Look, you don't know what you're doing, Brian. You're going downhill. I've been telling you, you've been going downhill for years. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the rhetoric.
Right.
I mean, that was the general thing. And you need to sell your music. So as Brian is becoming a father, and trying to be loving. He has this father figure, literally his own father, who is telling him that he's washed up and that he isn't worth anything. So these are key factors. Now, remarkably, Friends is released, and a week or two later, Mike and Brian are, boom, Do It Again comes out, and they're on the top of the charts again, which
Yeah.
for the Beach Boys as a group is fantastic. He stopped. And the first thing he did in December of 68, December 7th, I think, he went into the studio with the Honeys, his wife Marilyn, her sister Diane, and then their cousin Ginger. And they started working on a couple of songs.
Yeah.
But that was the first time he went back into the studio. It wasn't Beach Boys. He left 2020 to them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And the thing he gave them for that, what's the song that he gave them? It wasn't Cabin Essence in Our Prayer because those were leftovers.
Time to Get Alone's on that one.
Time to Get Alone, and then there was one other.
We're Together Again.
I Went to Sleep.
Went to Sleep. Yeah.
Those are the two. And again, now I Went to Sleep's not a relationship song, but it's Brian.
Absolutely.
This is me in my moment. This is me in my recorded moment. I'm recording this now. This is me in this moment. This is who I am.
Absolutely.
And that's who he was from the success of Pet Sounds. Now we all look at Pet Sounds today. Again, we think, okay, the album, they're feeding animals. That's what this is. But Pet Sounds was much, much more than that. You know, Brian hearing Rubber Soul, being inspired, taking from Rubber Soul, oh, I want to make a collection of songs that is a record, that is a statement.
Right.
So those things were all, but that's how he thought. He wanted to make statements. And it wasn't that he wanted to make pop statements. He didn't want to make hit record statements. He just he just got to the point in his life by the mid to late 60s where whatever he was writing, if he was going to put his time and energy into it, it was going to be captured in the moment. And whether it was Busy Doing Nothing or I Went to Sleep or I'd Love Just Wants to See You in the Nude, it did not matter because that's what he was thinking at the time. And that's what he was going to give us.
Absolutely.
That's what he was going to give the world. And no one knew if Pet Sounds was going to be successful.
Right.
And similar to Friends, it was more successful in the UK.
Oh yeah.
Than it was here. But thanks to Wouldn't It Be Nice and God Only Knows, and Sloop John B, it got bumped up the charts high enough in the US that it's crazy to me, right? But if you go back and read of that period, everybody kind of considered Pet Sounds not a great success in the US.
It was only in the top 10. It was number one. So it was.
Well, it wasn't number one.
Failure.
So this is kind of a letdown.
Right. Unreal. Unreal.
It's not even close to a letdown. It's like the most important album of all time.
Yeah.
And then just ask Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
And then you know, recently they had the poll where, not that polls mean anything because we as fans of any music, you like what you like.
Yeah.
But now they called Good Vibrations, I think, the happiest recording of all time.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. Yep.
Long live Audrey Wilson is what I say to that. Long live Audrey Wilson.